me say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Despite constitutional guarantees, American civil rights and liberties are constantly in danger of violation, whether by individuals, corporations, or government institutions. Regardless of whether personal prejudices or national security concerns lie at the root of these violations, challenging them and holding wrongdoers accountable is imperative for the sake of the constitutional integrity and the preservation of the American way. Trial lawyers advocate for awareness, the truth, and a person's right to know. They believe that in the absence of the truth, all of us stand helpless to defend ourselves, our families, our health, and our way of life. Oftentimes, we don't think about or worry about or understand what is happening to another until it happens to us. Deceits have no boundaries. Disease doesn't recognize the color of our skin or our political party's affiliation. When it comes to cover-ups and false allegations by agencies of the state and the federal government, there is not a soul amongst us who does not have a cringing fear of their overwhelming, awesome power. It is at these times that we need experienced and dedicated trial lawyers, the warriors in the courtroom, who are willing to battle for us tooth and nail in the halls of justice to protect our cherished way of life. When a person with disabilities, or anyone else for that matter, calls the police seeking assistance, they expect to receive help. Sadly, people with disabilities and their family members or friends do not always receive the help they expect. In fact, they may receive something that is quite the opposite. People who experience forms of developmental or mental disabilities are oftentimes doubly targeted by police violence due to high rates of poverty and homelessness. The brutal murder of a homeless man with schizophrenia in Fullerton, California, presents what happens when homelessness, mental illness, and police brutality meet. Kelly Thomas was sleeping on the streets when he was murdered. He was approached by 6 police officers in July of 2011. When Kelly allegedly refused to comply with his arrest, 2 police officers held him down, while 4 more police officers took turns beating him with their batons and stunning him with tasers for 8 minutes. The beating left Kelly comatose and disfigured. He died less than a week afterwards. This was what Kelly Thomas looked like just before he died. To be plain, very little information is collected on a national level concerning police injuring and killing of people with disabilities. The problem comes from a larger failure to gather information on a national basis about police injuring and killing civilians as a whole. Police departments either do not collect or are reluctant to collect this kind of information. Reports of police injuring and killing civilians are scattered and imprecise. All across this great nation of ours, we see horrific examples of some cops beating and mistreating persons with developmental or mental disabilities because the cops are not properly trained. More training and better awareness of the complexities of interacting with people with disabilities will help decrease and maybe eliminate these unspeakable crimes against society's less fortunate. In Maryland, Ethan Saylor died because police responded with rapid and unnecessary force to his disability. In San Diego, 21-year-old Antonio Martinez, who has Down syndrome, was walking to his parents' bakery around 8 p.m. when he was stopped, pepper sprayed, and beaten by a San Diego sheriff's deputy. In Los Angeles, an LA County sheriff's deputy was caught on a cell phone camera throwing a punch in a girl's face. What makes it more outrageous is that it is obvious he hit a person with special needs that was struggling to break loose from the grip of the cop and a female deputy as they were trying to make her get off the bus. In Dayton, Ohio, a mentally disabled teen was harassed and abused by a police officer. In Washington, D.C., police assaulted a homeless man in a wheelchair. In Idaho, police arrested and handcuffed an 8-year-old autistic girl. In Hillsborough County, Florida, police were caught by their own surveillance cameras dumping a quadriplegic man from his wheelchair onto the ground. Apparently, they were trying to determine whether or not he actually needed the chair. These are just a few of the hundreds of daily examples improperly trained police officers perpetrate on those less fortunate than us. Americans want to feel safe. Should we continue to accept the argument that cops only occasionally overstep their boundaries and only when handling guilty criminals and never with us? Can we really expect them to investigate and prosecute themselves when faced with allegations of misconduct? Can we believe that they are acting for our own good? Too many innocent people are convicted, too many are wrongfully executed. The cost has become too high for free people to bear. The Department of Justice has reported how deeply embedded police brutality is and why recent political rhetoric promising solutions barely scratches the surface. In this insider-exclusive network TV special, America's Police, Citizen, and Civil Rights Crisis, What You Need to Know, we visit with Bill Gilbert at the Gilbert Law Firm. As we take you inside today's legal system, examining lawyers' strategies and clients' thoughts, and in vivid detail, showing you the often heartbreaking stories of police abuse, excessive force, and wrongful death cases of these clients. These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle, where very few police departments, law enforcement agencies, and prosecuting attorneys and prison officials do the right thing when they are wrong. And you need experienced and passionate trial lawyers who wage a battle with their own financial resources to get their clients justice. From Ferguson to Baltimore, a new story about police brutality in America surfaces almost daily, raising the timely questions: are we protected from the people hired to defend us? Do these recurring acts of excessive force signal something new? Are we headed into a budding police state, or have we already arrived? The insider-exclusive investigative documentary network TV News Archives contains unprecedented news coverage on headline-making TV stories of police brutality, excessive force, corruption, and wrongful death. And here's just a few of the stories of the many victims of police brutality and wrongful death that the insider-exclusive network TV shows have reported on national network TV.
Let him go! What the fuck?
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes.
I'm screaming for help. They're kicking me in the head, telling me to shut up.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't shut up. I kept asking them what it's all about, screaming for help.
Yeah.
And they had an idea to shut me up. And I had one officer on my back while I was hogtied, and the other officer came around. Weisslich, okay, is the guy. He came around in front of me, grabbed me by my chin and the back of my head, and snapped it around while the other guy was pumping down on my back. And it was like a huge explosion.
Yeah.
Just a huge explosion. My whole body started quivering and whatnot. They pepper sprayed both my eyes, my nose, and my mouth.
But you're hogtied. You're no threat to them.
Yes.
You're no threat to them.
No, not at all. I'm hogtied. But I was yelling for help. They said, we'd like to explain this to you. It's all a mistake.
Right.
We were looking for somebody else. And I'm going, bullshit, bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay? They wiped out my eyes and, cleaned up my face.
But you're still in pain.
Oh, man, I was telling them I need an ambulance.
Yeah.
Okay? And they told me I could not have an ambulance. I
Why?
can't have an ambulance.
Why?
Because I can't. That's just it. I can't have an ambulance.
Yeah.
All right? So I tried to make my way over to my phone. I said, fine, I'll call my own ambulance.
Yeah.
And I tried to make my way over the phone to call my own ambulance. They unplugged the phone on me.
What?
And I'm like here by myself in my house.
Yeah.
My own house.
Yeah.
All right? Well, what can I do? I can't do nothing. All right? They said, you want to go to the hospital? We'll take you to the hospital. I said, oh, bullshit. I'm not going nowhere with you guys. You guys will drop me off in a ditch. And Jimmy LeBeau will just be found and nobody will ever know what's happened. No, I'm not going to the hospital with you guys. I want an ambulance. Well, you can't have that. I said, look, are you guys going to charge me with something? If you're not going to charge me something, you get the fuck out of my house. Right now. You get the fuck out. And they're like, okay, Jimmy, okay, but I don't want to see this appearing on my desk tomorrow. I don't want to hear from you tomorrow. You got to give me your word. I'm not going to hear
Make
from
a complaint.
you tomorrow.
Yeah. Such a call for justice happened on July 17, 2007, when Eddie Ford was arrested and jailed in Yakima, Washington, for exercising his constitutionally protected First Amendment right of free speech. At the time of the incident, Eddie was driving to work shortly after midnight when he was stopped by a City of Yakima police officer. The Yakima police officer, Ryan Erlacher, accused Eddie of playing his car stereo music too loudly, which he denied, and threatened to take him to jail unless he, quote-unquote, shut his mouth. And this is recorded in this police dash video.
Sir, step out of the car, keep your hands where I can see them, or force will be used. Turn around and face the car. Turn around and face the car, or force will be used. Put your hands behind your back.
For what?
Do it now or you're going to get tased.
What
Do it now or you're going to get tased. I will explain it. Let go. Turn around or you're going to get tased. Don't be an idiot.
You don't idiot out here. Oh my God.
Stop running the mouth. Listen.
Baby, go
If you talk over me, you are going to go to jail, sir.
Yeah.
Do not talk over me.
I ain't never heard something there.
If you cooperate, I may let you go with the ticket today. If you run your mouth, I will book you in jail for it. Yes, I will. And I will tow your car. You cooperate, shut your mouth, I'll give you a ticket and you can go. You understand me? Well, then I can take you to jail if you'd like. Would you like to go to jail, sir?
I got to go to work. I got to be at work.
Well, that's not going to happen if you keep running your mouth. Okay? If you have diarrhea in the mouth, you will go to jail. If you cooperate with us and treat us like human beings, we will treat you like a human being. You understand me?
Civil Rights Justice, Albuquerque Police, and Michael Cruz's story. To examine how Michael's constitutional rights were violated by the Albuquerque Police and several of its officers. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 prohibits state and local governments from engaging in a pattern or practice of misconduct by law enforcement officers that deprive individuals of federally protected rights. The department has conducted similar investigations into the use of force by law enforcement agencies, both large and small, across the country. Under Title IV of the United States Code, Section 1983, civil rights of individuals are protected from misconduct by law enforcement officials. It is unlawful for any arresting officer or enforcer of the law to act in a manner that deprives or restricts the rights of any person. Police misconduct can take many forms, including, but not limited to, police brutality, malicious prosecution, false arrest, false imprisonment, the use of excessive force, police beatings, taser abuse, and police shootings. Police misconduct lawsuits since 2010 have resulted in a tab of more than $24 million for Albuquerque taxpayers. The number will likely increase as several suits are ongoing and recent officer-involved incidents may result in new lawsuits being filed.
Watch the strip! Watch the strip! Watch the strip! Watch the strip!
The driver wouldn't stop and instead led authorities on a chase that wound through neighborhoods. It all came to an end around 7:41 in the evening near the intersection of Parmalee and 142nd Street. Here, a deputy was laying down a spike strip. The suspect races around the corner, nearly striking the deputy, who leaped out of the way to avoid being hit. His partner then opened fire.
A witness says it appeared to her that the suspect had already hit the spike strip, ending the pursuit, yet deputies shot into the car anyway.
He's got the gun drawn, and he may be shooting the suspect.
6 to 8 bullets fired from a deputy's gun stop a fleeing suspect dead in his tracks. Detectives say he repeatedly pulled the trigger after the 44-year-old driver aimed his car at the deputy's partner, who was laying a spike strip at Parmalee Avenue and 142nd Street.
Today, the Insider exclusive investigative TV series goes behind the headlines in Police Brutality, Carlos Pacheco's story, to investigate a police brutality case against the NYPD and how some rogue police officers beat, handcuffed, and tasered a 27-year-old epileptic young man, Carlos Pacheco, while he was suffering from a seizure.
And I was screaming for them to stop because he was catching a seizure. And they started tasing him.
Yeah. If I happened to be that cop that shot your husband with a taser, and I'm here right now, what would you say to me?
You destroyed me emotionally. I don't trust any cops anymore. My daughter, you let her see her father like that. That's what kills me the most.
Yeah.
And everybody says, how do you feel? Why do you feel that way if it didn't happen to you?
Yeah.
It happened in front of me and I was helpless. I couldn't do anything about it because I was scared that they were going to hurt me if I tried to interfere. So all I can do is just talk. Don't do it, scream how I felt, but I felt helpless. So.
Yeah.
When I was finally able to deal with the killing of my son, all I could do was cry and cry and cry. To this day, the anger just doesn't stop. especially with them being now harassed by the police because they harass my kids to get to me. They arrest them, they'll stop them in the street, they can't go to the store and come back without the cops stopping them, searching them. They come to my house 12:30 in the night. No sooner than they came inside, the cops broke down my door, talking about everybody on the floor. They threatened to take my grandbabies. They're claiming they found all these drugs in my house. We went to court, they dismissed the case because they know they didn't find no drugs in my house. That was just pure harassment. We had a barbecue in front of my house. They beat my oldest son so bad. All I could see was losing another son. I get out and I speak about, you know, the way they have no respect for human life, the way they just harass and abuse and murder innocent people. This is not nothing that somebody told me. This is what I witnessed in spirit on my own. And especially since I do this now on a national level, going, speaking to other families and seeing what they're going through, these cops are totally out of control. My one wish would be that I was not in this position that I am in and missing my second oldest son and having to live in such pain every day. I wish I still had my son, Malcolm Ferguson.
On a cold, freezing night in Milwaukee, December 10th, 2003, Curtis Harris was arrested in his home on a routine disorderly conduct charge, handcuffed, then punched in the face and shoved in the mud by former Milwaukee police officer Kevin Harris. Dragged to the Milwaukee police jail, Curtis walked into the Milwaukee booking room where his life changed forever when Clark deliberately and maliciously used excessive force, throwing Curtis headfirst into a concrete wall for no reason whatsoever, rendering him a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. Today, the Insider Exclusive will show you the actual Milwaukee police surveillance camera video in the booking room, which completely contradicted the lies of Clark and his fellow officers. How Clark and his fellow officers taunted, ridiculed, and laughed at Harris as he lay paralyzed by Clark on the cold cement jailhouse floor, and he drifted in and out of consciousness. How the wheels of justice turn in police brutality cases like Curtis's. How Jason Abraham of the law firm of Hupy and Abraham got some justice for Curtis Harris.
I became a cop. Of course, probably like a million other cops, they want to help people. They want to do things the right way. They want to protect the innocent. They want to protect the vulnerable. That's why I became a police officer. I had a lot of people ask me why it took a year to file a lawsuit. In that year's time, I was hoping that my family would publicly be told, along with my supporters, simply we jumped the gun. When I was released, the night I was released, my lawyers told me the sheriff and the state's attorney would sit down and make me understand, me being a cop, why they did what they did, the evidence they had. A few months later, I couldn't do it immediately, obviously. A few months later, after the real offender, it was proven and he was killed, I got in touch with Dave Carlson, my lawyer, and I asked him, let's sit down. He got back to me and laughingly said, they won't talk to us, they hired lawyers. My case is a true example of don't always believe what they say, don't always jump to an opinion, let it play out. They've allowed their personal ambition to corrupt their integrity. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. If they can live with themselves and it doesn't hurt anybody else, that's your business. But then when you start hurting other people, obviously now that's my business.
Wrongful convictions occur every month in every state in this country. and the reasons are all varied and all the same. Bad police work, junk science, faulty eyewitness identifications, bad defense lawyers, lazy prosecutors, and arrogant prosecutors. Our criminal justice system is supposed to err on the side of innocence, sifting the clearly guilty from those less obviously culpable. Imprisoning or condemning the innocent exposes a host of procedural defects in our criminal justice system. Justice must be our eternal aspiration, but we should greet skeptically those who ever claim it has been fully achieved. Ted White's story is not a work of lofty philosophy or jurisprudence. It is his humble first-person story told in everyday terms of how injustice happened one blunder at a time. A nightmarish story of being imprisoned for something he did not do. No one on earth knows better than the person wrongfully imprisoned how unjust his situation is. Even devoted loved ones and dedicated lawyers can never have the same certainty as Ted White, who knew absolutely he was not guilty. And in the end, Ted White's account is an eyewitness testimony to the epitome of human isolation. Wronged, separated from society and loved ones, and trapped in an existence defined by what Ted alone knows without a doubt to be a lie. The Insider Exclusive presents a true story, a story of final justice, the exoneration of Ted White.
My name's Jeffrey Scott Hornoff, and I'm a police officer. I was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Every step of the judicial system failed me and my family. And if not for the guilt and remorse of the true killer, I'd still be in prison.
She died. I killed her.
Why would you not want to ensure that California stops putting innocent people in prison? It's a very good question.
I was locked up when I was 20 years old, just turned 20 years old. I'm 42 now, so I've been in a little over 22 years.
It was hard for my father to explain to me. I got convicted of raping somebody, but Daddy didn't do it. So it was like, how you not do it, Daddy, if you've been in here for all these years now?
Everything in life is wonderful, and then one day, somebody comes up and tells a lie on you and you end up in jail. What's different is he knows fair doesn't exist.
When they told me rape, robbery, possession of instrument of crime, gun, conspiracy, all these, I'm like, oh my God, you know, just almost like 100 years in jail for something you didn't do, and I'm really scared.
I was in shock because I got found guilty.
I looked him right in the face, and I said, you and I both know I didn't kill anyone. And he couldn't look me in the eye.
He sentenced me to all that time, and I didn't know what to expect in prison. You know, I expected be beaten, be raped. I expected to die in prison.
The government has failed to exonerate it.
It's finally over. It's been 19 years. What now? Go home.
Police abuse remains one of the most serious and divisive human rights violations in the United States today. The horrific images of Rodney King being beat by the LAPD and the execution of Oscar Grant by the BART police are some of the most blatant reminders of police brutality against innocent victims. The excessive use of force by police officers, including unjustified shootings, severe beatings, and fatal chokings, persist, because overwhelming barriers to accountability make it possible for officers who commit human rights violations to escape due punishment and often to repeat their offenses. Police and public officials greet each new report of brutality with denials or explain that the act was just an aberration, while the administrative and criminal systems that should deter these abuses by holding officers accountable instead virtually grant them impunity. This special insider-exclusive investigation discovered that police brutality is persistent and rampant across America, and that systems to deal with abuse have failed, and that victims seeking redress face daunting obstacles at every point in the process, ranging from overt intimidation to the reluctance of local and federal prosecutors to take on brutality cases of officers who have committed these human rights violations. Despite claims to the contrary from city officials where abuses have become scandals in the media, efforts to make meaningful reforms have fallen short. The barriers to accountability are remarkably similar from city to city. Shortcomings in recruitment, training, and management are common to all. So is the fact that officers who repeatedly commit human rights violations tend to be a small minority who taint entire police departments but are protected routinely by the silence of their fellow officers and by flawed systems of reporting, oversight, and accountability. Today, the Insider exclusive TV series examines this epidemic in this exclusive special, America's Police, Citizen, and Civil Rights Crisis, What You Need to Know, with Spokane, Washington civil rights lawyer Bill Gilbert of the Gilbert Law Firm. You will see how Bill exposes the lies and the contradictions of some police officers. As Bill has often said, the problem of police brutality is much more widespread than most Americans are willing to admit. Our nation practices a selective blindness. In this great and strong nation, we have all become unwitting accomplices to the continuation of the conflict. Bill has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best civil rights trial lawyers in Spokane, in Washington, and across the nation. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of police brutality. He understands that police brutality is one of the most serious, enduring, and divisive human rights violations in the United States. The problem is not just in Spokane, but nationwide, and its nature is institutionalized. And because of that, he is driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. He learned a long time ago that if a person hasn't discovered something that they will die for, they aren't fit to live. His goal is not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure all Americans have the right to a fair trial, honest cops, impartial prosecutors, and fair judges with no agendas, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And justice and power must be brought together so that whatever is just may be powerful, and whatever is powerful may be just. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It is my great pleasure to introduce Bill Gilbert to the show. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Morning, Steve.
We're in beautiful Wyoming.
Yes, we are.
It's gorgeous, and this is a great place to talk about you, your firm, what you do. What do you do? What's your firm do?
Well, I'm a trial lawyer, and we do primarily personal injury, wrongful death cases, medical malpractice, civil rights cases.
Bill, we're here today because there's a lot of problems going on in America between the police and Americans. You, as a former law enforcement officer and now a trial lawyer, have probably a very unique way of looking at all of the problems going on. Tell us your viewpoint.
Well, it's a pretty sensitive subject, obviously, for me because I've worked both sides of it. You know, America's just in a state of upheaval right now. We've got a lot of social disorganization. The government has become somewhat of a target because of a lack of leadership and concerns about what's going to happen with the country. And law enforcement is the face of the government. They're the face of the man. So whenever there's any type of upheaval at all, then law enforcement is on the front lines, and they become the target from many different perspectives, the perspective of violence and the social upheaval, the people trying to speak out and express themselves, and then the other side of it is the oppression of the government, trying to keep control of the people, and they're right in the middle.
When I seen recently in Charlotte, North Carolina, I saw rioting, places being burned. You know, it brings me back to 1965 in Los Angeles with the Watts riots. Right. And I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and I said, what has really changed between 1965 and today, you know, in terms of that kind of relationship? And I see, in some respects, progress, but in other respects, no progress. And I'm kind of looking for an answer about how to make things better, because if I was, you know, a police officer now, I'd be scared to death about using my weapon. I would be scared to death about using it. We also saw recently in Oklahoma where a young officer, a female officer, shot and killed. It appeared to be an unarmed guy, and she has been indicted for manslaughter, I believe, first-degree manslaughter. Right. One of the comments that I've had from other lawyers and other citizens is today's police aren't taught to de-escalate situations. What's your feeling on that?
Well, I would agree with that. From a little different perspective, you know, when I was a deputy, my sheriff, as an elected official, was very sensitive to that. We weren't allowed to carry nightsticks or batons. We actually were low band radio when I first started working there, so your backup might be in bed 45 minutes away, and when you got into a situation, you had to be able to relate to people and talk to people. We've kind of lost that mentality on both sides of the fence, not just law enforcement, but also with the people. People don't want to talk anymore. It just escalates to screaming and yelling and pushing, and law enforcement feels like they have to take control. You know, and I've got a different hypothesis on why some of this stuff is happening too, and I think that the conflicts that we've had in Afghanistan and Iraq and a lot of these officers that are coming back out of combat situations, they have a little different mentality, and their fight or flight response is a little bit different than the average officer. When they go into fight or flight, you can't change that in your body. I mean, it's an automatic response. And if it's conditioned for combat, that's a different response than it is conditioned for people. So I think it can escalate and get out of control in a hurry. But I also think that if you look at statistically what's happening, in 2015, I think we had double the police-involved killings than we had in 2014, and it was kind of averaged out for several years there. But I think it's just a lot of social upheaval, and we've gotten away from community policing. Right. And I think that I'm one of the few maybe that believes that was working. Community policing meaning walking a beat. Exactly. Not in your car, walking a beat. Getting to know people. It's similar to what we do in jury trials. Yeah. You know, becoming a member of the tribe versus becoming in conflict, or always being on the edge of being that person instead of being part of the community. Do you think that police are being properly trained today to deal with, as you're talking about community policing, to deal with people? I think that is that's a departmental problem. I think it depends on the department. It depends on the leadership. And it really does start from the top. If you've got, and I've done cases like this where they'll bring in a chief for a specific reason to clean out a department or to change a practice or policy, and they target certain types of chiefs who recruit certain types of officers. And I think it starts at that level, the leadership level, and then the type of officer they recruit, the type of officer that becomes one of their intermediary line officers that does the training, that does the oversight. So I think that's a departmental question, but it's a problem across the country. I've got cases right now that deal with that. It's just, but the Department of Justice is stepping in. Yeah. I mean, they really are. They're stepping in. Seattle, in my neck of the woods in Washington State, Seattle. I've got a case in Pasco right now, and Department of Justice just investigated that department and came out with a scathing report about their training and policies in regard to shootings and officer confrontations. So let's talk about accountability, okay? Many times, and we're from LA, many times when there's a shooting,
the police department clams up. You even see this in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the police, I don't think, have released the full video.
They released it this morning.
They did. Okay. Did it show anything different from what the wife's video was?
It shows what the chief said it showed, and that is that it's you can't determine from any of the videos really what happened.
What a lot of people are complaining about, citizens, are that police departments are not accountable. In other words, they aren't working with the community when a crisis happens. And I was thinking about this, and let's take video that everybody takes, with their cell phones and that sort of thing. Oftentimes it's a selective video. Let's say you came to a scene where something happened before your video starts taking out. So it kind of prejudices the society's viewpoint about what really happened. I understand that. I get that, okay? But how do you see cell phones, videos, dash videos, lapel videos? How do you see, and what do you see, you being as a trial lawyer, being released to the public as soon as possible? Because that's what they're burning down cities about. You know that?
Yeah, transparency.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I've got a pretty well-rounded perspective on that. First, let me say that as a deputy at my dash cam, I loved my dash cam. Did you? Because no matter where I went, I was protected. I could come in here to a domestic violence call into this residence. My unit would be sitting outside my car, and the camera would be shining against the wall, not saying anything, but my audio was always on. Yeah. So even when my camera wasn't working, everything was being recorded. And anytime there was ever an issue or I was questioned about something, I'd just walk in and drop my footage on the desk to the boss and say, here you go. So for me, the opportunity for these officers to wear cameras, and most of the officers embrace it. I've deposed officers that are wearing them now, that are wearing body cams. They embrace it. So I think it's a gift for them, and it's a gift for the public to see what's going on. The other side of it is the blue line exists.
Yes, and the blue line, let's define that, what that is.
Well, the blue line is the I would just say, call it the law enforcement fraternity or the fraternal order.
They shut down, right? It's them against us.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I would just say that they will protect their own, because to them, having worn the uniform, there's very few people that'll step up and protect you. And we take care of each other on the street. But having said that, another virus in the system, from my standpoint, at least from law enforcement, what's protecting the law enforcement officers and preventing the citizens from seeing what they need to see right away is there's union involvement, there's contracts, there's the politics of all of that that's involved, and then of course there's trial lawyers. So they have all of these protections in place, try to make sure that they've covered everything, and they've got to protect the department, the political entities in the city, the individual officers, the unions in the middle of it, and there's a contract that says you can't interview our guy until X, Y, and Z happens, and then they have rights as well. So there's a lot of blocks and checks and balances in place that the public doesn't know about. They just assume that the chief is saying, I'm not showing you anything. Yeah. So.
You were a police officer, and I would assume that the reason you became a police officer is because you wanted to protect and serve. Is that correct?
I was drawn to it for a lot of different reasons. Law enforcement was a later career in my life. I played for a long time before I did that. But where I grew up in north central Montana, the sheriff's departments were part of the community. They were people, and the deputies took care of us, when we were kids and we were getting in trouble and doing crazy things.
So you liked that kind of relationship?
Yeah, it was an interactive kind of thing where for example, in dealing with kids, I felt like my job was to help get these kids from here and out of high school and into college alive with a good head on their shoulders and understanding what responsibility is. It's not a hook 'em and book 'em mentality. So that's kind of how I grew up. That's what kind of led me towards law enforcement. And actually that's what shifted me from law enforcement to the law, is seeing some things that needed some change.
Yeah, I was going to ask what encouraged you to make that transition? Because right now, oftentimes, the people you sue are the police departments. Yeah. The same department or, the same departments or department that you might have worked for.
Yeah.
So what do you see differently? And not only that, what changes have you seen been implemented as a result of your lawsuit? Because that's really the importance of a lawsuit.
Well, I'm going to use a current example versus something that's a little older. For starters, I don't just sue a police officer because, or any law enforcement officer because I can. I examine them like I do medical malpractice cases, and that is that sometimes things happen, and you have to look at the totality of the circumstances, and you have to understand the mentality of what's happening there, and what these guys go through on a daily basis. 1.5 million law enforcement officers in the country. How many contacts every day with the public? And then look at the percentage of when there's an incident. And so when I look at these things, I really examine them. And the one I've got right now that I'm working on, we've already been able to change policy, because what I do is I contact the department and the community, whoever it is, if it's the county or the city, and I let them know, hey, I'm coming, and here it is. But before I do this, before I file the tort claim, before I make this public, and there's a big hoopla over all of this, let's sit down and talk about what happened, how it happened, why it happened, and how we can make changes so it doesn't happen again. And right now I've got 4 departments and 2 public health agencies that have been to the table with us 3 times. I haven't filed the tort claim yet. We'll probably resolve it before we get to that stage, but they've already implemented changes in that county that will make sure that some of these things don't happen again in the future.
Bill, if you were addressing a law enforcement convention as a trial lawyer, as a former police officer, what would you tell them to do differently today to try and improve the relationship as the normal person perceives it between the police and an everyday citizen? What are some of the top 3 or 4 things that you would say?
Holy cow, how much time do we have, Steve? I mean, we could go on forever. I think that I would talk to them about their families, the people they work with, and the people in the community, and Little League games and high school football games, and going down to local restaurants and interacting and becoming a part of the public, and not just with those people that make us comfortable. We have a tendency to flock towards trial lawyers, hang out with trial lawyers, police officers hang out with police officers, but more social interaction. And if that, for churches, community organizations, becoming a part of the social network, so that the people can understand that they're real people, and then I think we would have less of this knee-jerk reaction when something happens. Everybody would stand back and say, okay, we know this guy, let's see what happened.
Yeah. Well, from the perspective of a police officer, there's a lot of guns on the street these days.
There are.
A lot of dangerous guns, a lot of automatic weapons. If I was a police officer, I'd be afraid, especially when I went into a community where I know there was a lot of shootings. What do you say to an officer? Don't shoot first, but analyze it. It really takes a lot of experience for an officer to determine when he should be using his weapon, right?
It does. I think a lot of that is training. Right now, some of these officers are conditioned in their fight or flight responses. They've been put in those positions so many times in bad situations, and in, as you say, certain areas where there's a lot of guns and a lot of violence, and these guys aren't rotated out of those areas on a regular basis.
They should be rotated out of them?
I believe they should be rotated.
You mean from a bad area to a better area?
Right, and rotated back in, because it's a conflict, because that eliminates some of the ability to get to know people, but there's a lot of stress on the street. I'm in a little different perspective. I grew up with guns. I grew up in Montana. We had rifles in our pickups when we go to school. So it's not a big deal. So I'm from a little different perspective there. I can't tell you how many times in 4.5 years as a law enforcement officer that I could have justifiably shot somebody and I didn't. But it's a mindset thing. Now, how do you train that into an officer? I don't know. And again, I'm going to go back to the theory that I have, and that is that a lot of these officers are coming out of combat situations. And so their responses are different. And once they start shooting, they don't stop. Right. You know, we used to be taught, they still are taught in use of force situations that when the threat is eliminated, you stop. I've got a case right now where they shot a guy, he buckled, went to the ground, they shot him 8 more times on the ground.
David, what's the purpose of that? I mean, seriously.
It's suppressive fire. This guy's a combat veteran, and once it starts...
But you see, that's what people are complaining about.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And it's a problem, and I think it's a problem across the country, and I actually have been looking for someone, an academic, to do a study on that, because I think it is relevant, and I think it does play a role, and I think that, and the more stress and duress you put these guys under, the closer they are to that threshold at any given minute. The guns themselves, I mean, that's a different topic. You know, hand grenades, sticks, knives, they've been around for centuries. So, I mean, that's a different subject.
One of the other problems that a lot of people perceive, whether they're right or wrong about this, let's talk about Baltimore. You know, Freddie Gray, I believe his name was killed in the back of a vehicle. How he was killed, it's still kind of murky about that. 4 or 5 police officers, 6 police officers were indicted, 4 went on trial, 4 were acquitted. And so from the public's viewpoint, they think, wow, Freddie Gray died, nobody's held responsible. How do you tell the public that someone must be responsible if he didn't kill himself, right?
Well, you know, I look at it as a trial lawyer a little differently. And what popped into my head when you said that was the McDonald's coffee case, believe it or not. The people that were sitting on the panel that reviewed, the citizens that were sitting on the indictment panels when they reviewed that Freddie Gray case, those were people from the community that saw all of the evidence and made a decision. Those of us on the outside, we saw a video or whatever it was that the press wanted us to see. And I think, honestly, part of the problem in America is the press has the ability to manipulate things, and they can take something, depending on what they want to do with it, they have so much power to spin it. Right. And they can stir it up, or they can shut it down.
Yeah, well, that's getting back to the release of the videos, too, because oftentimes it's not a complete story.
Correct.
You know. One last thing. What do you have to say to America today about trying to improve police-citizen relationships?
Get to know your officers. Stop and talk to them.
They're not bad guys.
No.
Right?
No.
There's some bad apples.
Oh, absolutely. Just like in doing medical malpractice work. You know, there's any work. Lawyers, everybody. Yeah. There's bad apples. But if I had to say something, I would say get behind the community, get behind your officers. I remember back when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, and people giving up seats to military personnel on airplanes and stopping and shaking their hands in airports and those kinds of things, because we were behind them. And we supported them regardless of our political views. We supported these guys that were over there doing what, you know,
putting their lives at risk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those officers are doing the same thing. If you called them right now and you were in a situation, those guys would drop everything they were doing to come, and they would do everything they could to save your life. So stop on the street, thank them, and get to know them and let them know that you care. And they'll do the same thing. And once we start to reciprocate and we start to become more of a community, then I think that we eliminate some of this. But there's a lot bigger problems in the country than that. I mean, this is just an indication that we've got a huge problem with social disorganization in a fractured country right now. And you know, this upcoming generation of people or of young people, and then the next, you know, political scheme, whatever that is going to have a huge impact on what happens in America, law enforcement or otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your insight. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.